Hello, and welcome to an overview of Chicago's homeless services system. My name is Nicole Amling. I'm the Director of Policy and Planning at the Chicago Alliance to End Homelessness. I am going to be walking you through an overview of the homeless services system and Chicago's plan to end homelessness, and then I am going to turn this over to my colleague, Kathleen Molnar. So let's get started. I first want to talk about Chicago's plan to end homelessness. Some of you might be already familiar with Chicago's plan. The original plan was initiated a decade ago in 2003 and endorsed by then Mayor Daley. The goal of our plan to end homelessness, which is a community-wide effort, is to move our system away from simply managing homelessness to a system where we are truly ending homelessness for those in need by moving people quickly out of shelter and into housing and providing the supportive services that they need to stay stably housed. Our plan is based on three important principles. Number one, prevention. We want to prevent people from becoming homeless whenever possible. Staying in one's home is much better for the family and for the individual, and it's actually much more cost-effective for the system to keep people in their housing rather than having them become homeless. Housing first is a principle that we are applying system-wide. We don't want anybody languishing in the shelter system. We want them to get into housing and back on their feet as quickly as possible. And number three is providing the wraparound services that individuals and families need in order to stay stably housed. Those services run the gamut from health care and mental health care to employment and education. All sorts of resources that people need in order to be stable. Perhaps some of the resources that you and your colleagues are providing to individuals and families. Last year, in 2012, in the summer, we were very proud to launch a new version of Chicago's Plan to End Homelessness, Plan 2.0, A Home for Everyone. This plan was endorsed and supported fully by our current mayor, Mayor Rahm Emanuel, and it really represents an updated and refined approach to our efforts to prevent and end homelessness in Chicago. We took our experience of implementing the first plan to end homelessness. We looked at best practices from around the country and in our own backyard, and we put all of these great new ideas into our new plan to end homelessness. The plan was also developed and supported by community stakeholders from around the city. Over 500 people participated in the development of Plan 2.0, including 150 people who've experienced homelessness themselves. The vision of Plan 2.0 is simple and it's clear. In our community, everyone has a home, and you and your colleagues and the work that you do has a really important role in helping us achieve this vision of Plan 2.0. We believe strongly that when every person in Chicago has access to a safe, decent, and affordable home, that homelessness ends in our community and that we have achieved our goal. Plan 2.0 is divided into 7 strategic priorities. I like to think of them in groups. The 7 strategic priorities are listed on your screen, and we're going to go through them very quickly here. The first two, the crisis response system and access to stable and affordable housing, are really the nuts and bolts of our plan. Number one, we want to make sure that anybody who has a housing crisis in our city is quickly, efficiently assessed for their needs and referred to the appropriate intervention, that we have a high quality and state-of-the-art response system for anybody who is experiencing a housing crisis. Stable and affordable housing is truly the heart of what we're doing here. We need more of it, we need to maintain the housing that we currently have, and we need to set people on a path towards their own stable and affordable housing. And so that's really the goal of Plan 2.0. Number 3 and 4, youth homelessness and employment, are areas in which our community during the development process of Plan 2.0 really told us that we needed more effort and more energy. Youth experiencing homelessness are a fast-growing population in our community and need specialized services in order to to become successful adults and to not enter the cycle of homelessness. In this case, youth are defined as age 16 to 24, unaccompanied, and without a parental guardian. Employment is very clearly one of the best ways to get out of homelessness and to stay out of homelessness. So we need to be doing a better job of building the employability and the skills of the people who we are working with, and to make sure that more of them are leaving our system with earned income and a path towards self-sufficiency. Advocacy and civic engagement and cross-systems integration, number 5 and 6, are really where all of you come in. We understand that the homeless service system is rich with human resources and lots of exciting ideas, but we know that we can't do this alone, that this is a community-wide plan, and that we need to engage the entire city of Chicago and many other systems of care to help us achieve our ambitious goals of preventing and ending homelessness. And so we want to help more people get excited about the work that we're doing, and we want to build better relationships and better partnerships with other systems in order to achieve our goals. And number 7, capacity building, probably the least sexy of our 7 strategic priorities, but very important to make sure that we are building the resources within our own structure and our own work to be able to achieve these ambitious goals of Plan 2.0. It's also really important that we talk about the values that we are trying to embrace with Plan 2.0 and with our work. And I'm sure that many of these values are ones that you share, ones that I share, and that are grounded and that our work is grounded in. Most importantly, we're trying to increase and maintain the supply of affordable housing in our community. For too many people, housing is out of reach, and we need to make sure that we are helping people achieve that very important fundamental human right. We also want to make sure that we are reaching everyone and we are meeting their unique needs. So whatever subpopulation that we might encounter, whether it be families or veterans or LGBTQ population, we want to make sure that they are getting the services that they need, the housing that they need in order to be successful. We also want to be using best practices in service, whether that's harm reduction or trauma-informed care, asset-based principles. These are goals for our entire system to make sure that we are meeting clients where they're at and providing the highest quality of care. Always, safety and well-being of both consumers and providers is important, as well as expanding our cultural competency and making sure that consumers and the people that we're trying to serve have a choice and have a voice in where they live and what services they receive and the life path that they are on. I hope hearing about Plan 2.0 has been exciting for you. I hope that listening to this has encouraged you to want to learn more. If so, I encourage you to download your very own copy of Chicago's plan, which is available on our website, www.thechicagoalliance.org. It's very important, as I said, that we band together as a community to fight this really important challenge and to address the needs of people experiencing homelessness. You might also want to think about what our community-wide plan means for your work and how it could be implemented into your day-to-day work or into your organization. And so feel free to have those conversations with your colleagues, your neighbors, your friends. Plan 2.0 is a vision that we can all embrace. And there's always plenty of work that we're doing to implement the 7 priorities, and we would welcome your participation. So feel free to visit our website, learn more about the plan and how you can get involved, and think about where the strategies that we're trying to implement might intersect with the strategies that you are working on at your organization. I'd like to switch gears here to talk briefly about the homeless system, to tell you a little bit about the number of people in Chicago who are experiencing homelessness, why homelessness is a growing concern in our community, and what some of the resources that you might be able to refer your clients to are. So again, let's get started. This chart, as you can see, shows over the past couple of years the number of people experiencing homelessness in Chicago. This data is from a point-in-time count that Chicago does every other year. We are recording this webinar in March of 2013, so within the next couple of months we will be able to fill in a 2013 column, and we'd be happy to share that data with you once it becomes available. As you can see, we are counting people who are both sheltered in our housing system and unsheltered, those who might be living on the streets, staying in parks or on the trains, people without a place to call home that night. From the bottom row, you can see that as we implemented Chicago's original plan to end homelessness, we saw a nice dip in our numbers of people who were experiencing homelessness. But then in 2008, as the economic recession hit, and as more people were finding themselves unemployed or underemployed and at risk of homelessness, our numbers have been slowly creeping up. We would really like to see that those numbers continue to go down, and that is our goal, and we invite you to participate in the work that we are doing to have less people experience homelessness in our community. So about 6,500 people on any given night are homeless in Chicago, which is less than other cities we get often compared to, like New York City or Los Angeles. But still, to have anybody sleeping on the street or in a shelter tonight is too many. So why do people experience homelessness? Since you are out there working in the field, I probably don't need to tell you any of this. About a quarter of the people living in our city live below the poverty line. And that number has been rising dramatically in the last couple of years and doesn't look like it's going anywhere anytime soon. We also have a severe shortage of affordable housing in Chicago. Again, something that you probably are well aware of. At latest count, our county is short 180,000 affordable rental units. To put that point into perspective, a national organization calculates every year what it would cost to afford an average 2-bedroom apartment in your community and how much you would have to earn on an hourly basis in order to afford that apartment. Last year, in 2012, a person in Chicago would have to earn $18.42 an hour to afford the average 2-bedroom apartment. As you all know, $18.42 an hour is over double what our minimum wage is and out of reach for too many of the people that we are trying to serve. Another example of the severe shortage of affordable housing is the CHA waitlist, and we all know how long that waitlist is as well. So thankfully, Chicago does have a robust service system available for people who are experiencing homelessness. We have about 277 programs at last count provided by 89 agencies. We have just under 12,000 beds in our housing system, broken down 11% emergency shelter, about a quarter interim housing, and the rest permanent housing solutions. I'm going to explain each of these types of housing and help you determine what might be best fit for your clients and how you can access these housing interventions. First, I just want to show you a chart that we are very proud of and goes back to what we've been talking about this entire webinar. So part of the goal of our plan is to move away from an emergency shelter model and to embrace a permanent housing model. So as you can see here, from the blue bars, we have been slowly reducing since 2002 the number of emergency shelter slots in our system. At the same time, increasing the number of permanent housing options in our system. But throughout the timeline, not losing any housing, but continuing to increase the number of housing options available to people who need it. So this chart really represents what we're trying to do and the direction that we are going into with Chicago's housing inventory for people who are experiencing homelessness. So the first type of housing intervention I want to talk about is emergency shelter. And this is what you would probably most have heard of or are most familiar with. So emergency shelter is truly a low-demand, short-term housing option, often only open at nighttime and overnight. They are providing a safe space for people to sleep, to have a meal, and perhaps to take a shower. And they're also providing referrals to other housing and services, but often not providing any of those services on site. Chicago has approximately 1,300 beds of emergency shelter. Half of that is funded by the city, and half of that is at one large shelter called Pacific Garden Mission. Interim housing is a new model that was launched here in Chicago that is really trying to turn the emergency shelter model on its head to be able to provide a short-term housing intervention, but one where people can have their own space, they can leave their belongings, and they can build trusted relationships with case managers in order to move quickly into permanent housing. So the goal of interim housing is not to stay there for very long, but to rapidly be rehoused back into your own apartment. And this is really a service-enriched environment and really based in a case management and assessment model. Chicago has about 4,000 beds of interim housing currently. Rapid rehousing is our newest intervention, and it is really being encouraged by the federal government, by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And the goal of rapid rehousing is to help people who are facing a temporary or a short-term crisis and provide a small, modest amount of rental assistance to move them back into their own apartment. So rapid rehousing assistance can be used for up to 24 months. In Chicago, it's probably be used for a smaller time frame, 6 to 9 months, to really help people get back into housing as quickly as possible. And then once they are there, provide the case management services that addresses their housing barriers. Right now, we only have about 700 slots for rapid rehousing, but hope to grow that over the next couple of years. The final intervention that we have in our toolbox is permanent supportive housing. And this is really the foundation of the work that we are trying to do. Permanent housing is a long-term rental assistance, hence the name permanent housing, coupled with the supportive services that individuals and families need in order to stay stably housed. Permanent supportive housing can either be all based in one building, project-based, or scattered site, apartments throughout the city. Most of the permanent housing that we have available is for people who have disabilities or for who are chronically homeless. So it might not be the best fit for all of your clients, but there could certainly be people who would benefit from it. And this chart outlines the number of units that we currently have of permanent supportive housing for singles and for families, and what we estimate that we need to meet current demand. And as you can see, we need about 2,000 additional units of permanent supportive housing to meet our current demand. So you're probably wondering how you might be able to refer your clients or the people that you work with to these various housing interventions. Let me tell you about that. So for emergency shelter, your best bet is to call 311. 311 will tell your client or the person that you're working with to go either to the nearest police station, emergency room, or city service center, at which point they will be picked up and taken directly to a shelter. This transportation and emergency services program is run by Catholic Charities. For interim housing, at this point in time, your best bet is to go directly to the interim housing program. We have a map on our website that lists many of the interim housing programs. Unfortunately, because this is a popular intervention, many of these programs do have wait lists, but still a great opportunity to make friends and build partnerships with the folks at your local interim housing program to find out more about what they have to offer. For both rapid rehousing and permanent housing, there's several online search tools and connection devices that we highly recommend that you take a look at. first is a great resource called the Chicago Housing Options Survey Tool, or commonly abbreviated as HOST. The website is listed right here, www.chicagohousingoptions.org. This is a great resource to find out what your clients or people that you're working with might be eligible for in terms of housing interventions. Illinois Housing Search is a website that we highly recommend for searching out affordable housing options. And we are also finally proud that Chicago is in the process of launching a central referral system that will allow households to apply just once for all of the various permanent housing options in the city. And that website is www.chicagocrs.org. And that is all I have to share with you for today. We have covered Plan 2.0 and its exciting innovations and what we are trying to achieve as a community. And then we have walked through what the various housing interventions are and how you can access that. I am now going to turn it over to my colleague, Kathleen. I thank you for your time and for your interest, and I wish you the very best of luck. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kathleen Molnar, and I am the Senior Director of Program Development at the Chicago Alliance to End Homelessness and the Emergency Fund. And I'm going to be talking with you today about homelessness prevention resources. As Nicole talked about, we have a plan to end homelessness in Chicago and have had one for quite a while. And recently, last summer, we added Plan 2.0, which is an expansion of the Plan to End Homelessness, and it helps direct the services that are being provided and helps us do a better job of making sure that we decrease the number of people who are homeless, decrease the number of people who are entering homelessness, and hopefully shorten stays in places like shelters and interim housing projects, and just in general help people remain in their homes, and if they unfortunately lose their homes, are able to have a shorter stay outside of their homes. So what I'm talking about today is a small part of that, and it's helping people stay in their homes, or if they have lost their homes, quickly get back into them, because we do use some prevention resources to help people who have become homeless. And I'm going to talk a bit about this part of the system, how you access these resources, what's out there, some of the limitations of those funds, and most importantly, how to help you and the people you serve get to them. So the first one I'm going to talk about is something that's available through the Emergency Fund, and it's called the Flexible Financial Fund. So here are some of the requirements of the fund and some of the limitations of the fund. There's a $500 cap, which means people can't get more than $500. It's available once a year for most types of assistance, such as rent or utilities, and it covers a wide variety of things, hence flexible in the title. Rent, utilities, transportation. We list a number of them here. You can read them. There's also a bunch of things that it also can cover that are not listed here. We really have tried to make these funds as flexible and as helpful as possible. We work with fund managers at different agencies, and we allow them to work with the people they serve to figure out what will be most helpful. They're often used with other funds. That's because there is only a $500 cap. They're used as a last resort, and the assistance must resolve the issue. So it's not supposed to be a Band-Aid, and it's not supposed to be sort of throwing money at a huge problem. You know, somebody who owes $10,000 on their mortgage, for example, $500 would not fix that. That would be a Band-Aid. But somebody who owes a large amount of money on their utilities, but $500 would help them get onto a payment plan, that would resolve the issue if the payment plan is a reasonable payment plan. So I'm going to go through the funds, and then at the end of discussing the funds, I'm going to talk about how they're accessed, because there's one central way of doing that. The next resource I'm going to discuss is something called DFSS Rental Assistance. And DFSS stands for the Department of Family and Support Services. That's the city's Department of Family and Support Services, and these funds are available through their community support, community service centers. There are a number of them around the city. I think the one that I hear mentioned most is 10 South Kedzie. A lot of people know that address and know to go there if they need assistance with a variety of different things. This is one-time rental assistance. Doesn't cover utilities. It doesn't cover deposits. There's a cap of $900, though they will sometimes cover 2 months of assistance. So this can be expanded to $1,800. There's a variety of documentation that's required from the landlord, and I know some landlords, as with all the programs that require documentation, sometimes are unhappy with what they have to provide. And I always tell people who are seeking the assistance that they should try to sell it to their landlord if they're behind on rent, and this is one of the ways they can get caught up, and the landlord can get some of the money that they're owed. They should be willing to work with the city and willing to work with the tenant to try to help them get caught up on their rent. But it is important that that the consumer who needs the help and the landlord knows that this is not always a quick process, and that sometimes there's some hoops in the form of paperwork that have to be jumped through. So this is another resource that's available for rent. And when it says one time, it really is one time. This is not something that people can go back for again and again. Another resource we're going to discuss today is something called the State Homeless Prevention Fund. As the name suggests, it comes from the state of Illinois. It is a fund that is available around the state. Different continuums of care dispense the funds. In Chicago, we have set a cap of $1,500 of assistance to a household. There are different caps around the state. We've set that because even though Chicago gets a fair amount of money, less than we have in the past due to state budget issues, but more than any other continuum of care in the state, there are a lot of people to assist. So the cap was set to try to help as many people as possible, but still to offer a significant enough amount of money that people can get a couple of months of rent arrears paid or a pretty good size utility bill paid. This funding is available once in a 24-month period, and that comes from the state requirements. So they don't say 2 years, they say 24 months, which would mean if somebody got help today, you count 24 months from today, and they can get help after that time period has passed. This funding source only helps with the 4 items that are listed here: rent, utilities, and utilities includes gas, electric, and water. It does not include things like phone bills or cable or internet service. So rent, gas, and water. Security deposits. It does not include things like key fees, move-in fees, credit checks, or reservation fees. A lot of landlords have started charging other fees which are not refundable to tenants upon moving out if the unit is returned or maintained in a satisfactory manner. This only covers security deposits and mortgages. And I will say in Chicago we do very little mortgage assistance. Finding people who only need a maximum of $1,500 of mortgage assistance to remain in their homes is pretty challenging. Only about 1% of our funding is spent on this. Another requirement for this fund is that the people who are getting it must experience and document, so document with paperwork, something to support it, a temporary short-term crisis. So this means something like a job loss, a delay in the receipt of public benefits. That could be not receiving Social Security payments for a period of time, not receiving TANF funds for a period of time. things like that. A disaster like a fire or a flood, a divorce where somebody who was earning funds leaves the household, an increase in the size of a household, maybe a baby is born, or somebody takes in children or other family members, and that stretches the household budget beyond what it was before. Those are some examples of the short-term crisis. It's important, though, that those are part of the situation that the household is in and that those can be documented. And I know sometimes it's difficult to document those, but that is part of the funding requirements. And so if somebody is applying and you are a worker and you're case managing them or helping them, it would be good to think about how you can help them gather some documentation for that. There's also a fund called the EFSP, Emergency Food and Shelter Program. This used to be known as FEMA funds. These can be used similarly, but not exactly the same. We're going through all these, but it's important to remember that, as I briefly mentioned, there is one point of access. So you're going to have this information, and it's here in the PowerPoint, and I am talking about it, but there is a system so you don't have to remember all of these details, even though I am discussing them. These funds can be used to pay up to 1 month of rent, not more than $1,200. So now I think you've been told maybe 3 or 4 different caps. It can be used to pay up to $500 of rent arrears, of utility arrears. And people can receive it once a year. The assistance has to keep the household in their current housing for at least 30 days. So the goal here is to keep people housed, but it's not for an especially long period of time. So that's a pretty low threshold to document. And those funds come out, I think, twice a year, and they're helpful because there's not as high a threshold to meet for people to be eligible. So how do you access all this prevention assistance? Well, since January of 2007, you call 311 and you ask for short-term help. And that gets you connected to something called the Homelessness Prevention Call Center. This call center was created to help consumers and providers alike not have to deal with a giant list or a book of resources that quickly become out of date, that often change when programs change their requirements, and that can't really keep up to date, sometimes up to the hour, information about when funds are available. So the call center does that for all of us. And they know when there are spots available for referrals for a particular program. For example, the State Homeless Prevention Fund. They know when those EFSP funds have been spent and the funding is gone for the year or for the time period that they are available. And the call center knows when agencies have spots available and can take the referrals or when they can't, or when the worker is out of town for a few days and nobody can be sent over. So it's helpful in that they're sort of the initial screener. They do a pre-screening, and they're also sort of a traffic light. They keep the providers from ending up with 500 people waiting at their door, because we don't run waiting lists for these programs, and they help people who are ineligible at least find out before they've gone somewhere, maybe waited in line and submitted a lengthy application. They at least help them avoid some of that wasted time. So the first number here, like I said, 311 short-term help, that's for Chicago residents. People will sometimes say, oh, I can't call 311. My phone won't let me call. Well, that's usually because they are not a Chicago resident and they're calling from outside the city. If somebody is a suburban Cook County resident, they can call the other number, 1-877-426-6515. It's the same call center, but there are actually different call takers. And there's a slightly different process right now for the way that calls are directed. The Suburban Cook County Alliance is split up between south, west, and north, and that's how they do their services and their call screening. Okay, a few notes about the best ways to access the call center. Monday's the busiest day to call. Not surprisingly, people do their business over the weekend, and then they figure out that they have some financial troubles, and they call in on Monday to try to get some help. The lunch hour is the busiest time to call because people are often working, and that's when they have free time away from their job. And we completely understand that, but if you have more flexibility in your schedule and cannot call during lunch, it would be great if you could use your flexibility and call at a different time. Staff can help a client call, or workers can help a client call but cannot call for them. This is because information is entered into HMIS. That's the Homelessness Management Information System. It's a computer system that HUD requires providers to use, and people who call have to give their consent to enter their information. There are call takers who speak Spanish. Any other languages, if somebody calls and they do not speak English, they will need to use a translation line. You might just want to prepare a caller that they will use a translation line, and it might take a minute or two, probably not longer than that, to get the translation service on the line. If you've ever used one of those, it does just take a little bit of coordination to do that, and just so the person isn't wondering why there's some dead air or somebody speaking English to them when they've said they don't speak it. That way they won't hang up. And finally, and this is extremely important, the call is a pre-screening. If your client, the person you're serving, the consumer, whatever language you use, is told that he or she qualifies, they are still going to have to go through a screening. And that's not to duplicate work. That's not to make anyone's life difficult. That is just because the call center is exactly that. It's a call center. They never see the person you're serving. They never see any documentation. And for some of these funds, as I explained, documentation is required. So they do say that on the call that this is a pre-screening and that you will still need to provide documentation and answer some questions when you go to the agency that you are referred to. But people often hear, yes, you've gotten a referral, which means you are guaranteed funding. So it's just important to remember that if somebody is referred to an agency and they go there and they do not have documentation of a job loss, for example, or they cannot prove that they have an income. They say they have an income, but they can't document it. That is a problem. They need to be able to do that. So somewhere between the pre-screening and the screening, there is paperwork that needs to be filled out, and there is paperwork that needs to be brought in. So something to remember. A few reminders. There's not enough assistance to meet the need of everybody who calls the call center or who goes to one of the community service centers looking for funding. We know this, you know this, you saw the numbers that Nicole presented. It's one of the reasons why we had a 10-year plan to end homelessness, and now we have Plan 2.0. Our work is not done. Between just the challenge of the need for more affordable housing, the need for better jobs that pay a living wage, and the financial crisis that we have been struggling through, there are a lot of people who need help, and not everybody who calls is going to be helped. So I know that's a downer to hear, but it's the truth. Sometimes helping the people you work with develop a crisis plan that doesn't involve financial assistance is going to be necessary, which means discussing difficult things such as, do you have any family members you could stay with? Do you have friends you could stay with? Do you know where a shelter is in your area? Have you, Nicole talked about calling 311 and asking for shelter pickup or going to a police station or emergency room. Have you done those things? Or do you know to do those things if you have to? Do you know how long you can stay in your apartment? Have you talked to your landlord? Is there anything you could do? It's really difficult, but sometimes people keep hoping and waiting that they will get assistance, and they may not get that. And finally, I include this here just because I think sometimes, especially people who are new case managers, as I once was, assume that somebody has a magical book or list of resources that they keep in their top drawer and they don't tell anybody else about. It's not true. There really are limited resources, and there's nothing magical out there. People are not hiding all the good ones from you and not telling you about them. It's just that it's challenging to get resources for people, and there's just not enough to go around. So I have shared with you today what I know about. If you hear about any other resources that I have not included here, I've included my contact information, and I would love to know about them. I'm really just focused here on prevention, and I did not talk about LIHEAP, for example, because I think most people and most of the people we serve are already hooked up and know to apply for their LIHEAP every year. But if you know of other things, please, by all means, share them, and I will put them in a future presentation, and I will make sure to credit you so that other people know that you shared a resource that you had. Anyway, I want to thank you for your attention. I'm going to assume your attention, and wish you a good day. Thank you very much.